The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
On a Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the home of one of the leading Pharisees, and the people there were observing him carefully. He told a parable to those who'd been invited, noticing how they were choosing the places of honor at the table. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not recline at table in the place of honor. A more distinguished guest than you may have been invited by him, and the host who invited both of you may approach you and say, "Give your place to this man." And then you would proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Rather, when you are invited, go and take the lowest place, so that when the host comes to you, he may say, "My friend, move up to a higher position." Then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he said to the host who invited him, "When you hold a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors, in case they may invite you back and you have repayment. Rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Next spring, my friends Ron and Kathy will be celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. And for those who know them, their story would make for a great American novel. You see, Ron and Kathy met in high school sweethearts. Both of them come from very humble working class families. A year after high school, they were wed. They were wed, in fact, on the first day of spring. Actually, Ron chose that date because he figured he'd always be able to remember it. Ron worked at a convenience store then, and while Kathy was going to school, an opportunity came their way. The owner of the convenience store approached Ron and said, "You know, Ron, I'm ready to retire, and I'm going to put the business up for sale. If you and Kathy can scrape the money together, happy to sell it to you. If you got 1 month, let me know." Scrape what money together? They had no money. But Ron came up with an ingenious idea, and he figured out that if he could offer an exclusive dairy contract to one of the local dairy companies, perhaps, just maybe, they would co-sign the loan, and sure enough, one of them did, and they bought the store. They worked very hard and were able to save enough money to then even build a second store and a gas station and the like. Always with a plan that they would retire when they were 45. And sure enough, when they turned 45, they had an offer they couldn't refuse for their business, and they sold it. To then begin their lifelong dream of traveling around the world. They'd already taken a few cruises, and they enjoyed it quite a bit, but now they would take the big cruise of a lifetime. Granted, Kathy did remark that they were 20 years younger than just about anyone else on the cruise, but they made lots of friends. Of course, they always made lots of friends. To know them really was an opportunity to become their friends, and it mattered to them not who you were, be you great, be you wealthy, be you influential, be you simple, be you humble, made no difference. But after a few years of retirement, something was missing from their lives. They didn't have any children themselves, and it wasn't so much that, but they felt that there was something more to life that they were missing out. And then it dawned on them that they had a mission they needed to carry out for the rest of their lives. And it was really quite simple. They realized that they were to bring joy, to be missionaries of joy to any and all that they encountered in life. And especially to those who were in any type of service industry or service position. The clerks behind the counters, the people picking up the trash, the custodians, whomever, those who cut the lawn, those who clean houses. And everywhere they encountered them, they ended up befriending them and looked for ways and opportunities just to bring a little more joy in their life. For example, at Christmas time, a couple of weeks leading up to Christmas, they don Santa hats, and they go around and they seek these people out wherever they're working, and they sing Christmas carols to them and offer them boxes of chocolates. They happen to have a swimming pool, and so at least once a year they put on a huge pool party, not for their friends, but for the children of their friends or the grandchildren of their friends. It's a huge event, and they make sure that everything's there so everybody has an absolutely wonderful time. Anytime they do even host an event with their friends or family, they don't spend very much time sitting at table. They're actually getting up and going around, making sure everybody else has what they want, has what they need. Ron has more jokes than you can possibly imagine, and of course he thinks they're funnier than anyone else. And Kathy is always so super gracious, always checking in with everyone equally so. In fact, they are known by some of the most influential people of their community, but also among the most common and ordinary person on the street. It is they who come to mind for me every time I hear this parable of Jesus, while he himself is invited to dinner at a leading Pharisees and sees what's taking place. Jesus, who is, yes, on the one hand, teaching about humility, but on the other hand, the flip side of the coin is also teaching about generosity. It's interesting, this is a parable among so many that Jesus himself also models for his disciples, but only once, according to Scripture. And it was there at the Last Supper. There at the Last Supper, where he gives those two highest places of table, not to James, not to John, as they had once requested of him with their mother, but the two places of honor at table, he gives to the youngest, St. John, and to the one who would betray him, Judas. And who sits at the lowest place at table? Peter, the one who is his right-hand man, his go-to guy, the one who's his confidant, the one who is revered by all, the first among the apostles, the lowest place. But then again, Jesus is the one who tells us he did not come to be served, but to serve. He is the one who gets up from table and goes around and washes the apostles' feet. But I'm still intrigued that he would have the youngest, who should have had that role and one place of honor, and that he would allow the one he would know to betray him to sit next to him in a place of honor. Was it perhaps that in this moment he was allowing really his generosity forth and his humility, that he is willing to allow one who would betray him to be so close on the hope and the possibility that he might not betray him, and at the same time to elevate the dignity of the youngest among them so that he wouldn't lose hope at the crucifixion and the like. Again, these are two powerful lessons that are meant to be one for us in terms of humility and generosity, because where there is one, there's always the other. True humility is not so much the thinking less of yourself, but thinking more of others. This is a mindset behind the taking of the lower place, saying like Jesus, I am among you as one who serves. And the flip side of the coin is generosity. Generosity is the acting out on true humility. This is the mindset of the genuine host, acting like Jesus, who drew close those who needed him most. And together, when you get this dynamic, this interplay between humility and generosity, there's a synergy that takes place. Something more comes forth. And what comes forth is joy. The interplay between humility and generosity actually creates joy, both for the receiver and the giver. And lasting joy is the only true wealth, real power, distinguished honor, and lasting pleasure. We're there both in this life and in the life to come. Now, while I put in front of you the example of my dear friends Ron and Kathy as really missionaries of joy, thankfully to their genuine humility, as well as their genuine generosity, always at interplay for others, and that they're intentional about it. Thanks be to God, they're not the only ones. There are many missionaries of joy in our midst. Perhaps you are a missionary of joy and don't even think of yourself as much. Missionaries of joy, we recognize them when we see them. They're the ones there at school in the lunch cafeteria who sits with that one student who's perhaps socially marginalized for whatever reason. And so instead of being concerned about their own social circle and network, they're more concerned about including that other person in their own personal social and network. They're the ones in our places of work who do a lot of the grunt work, if you like, some of the heavy lifting, not because they're striving just to get ahead. They're not looking so much for the recognition. They're really doing it, again, because their desire to give to another and to help another succeed, or vice versa at work. The ones who are mentoring people along, that their success is your success, and that you both experience that kind of joy. We see them in our neighborhood. They're the neighbors that aren't concerned about everybody else's business, but really they are concerned about everybody else's well-being, the well-being of the community, of the neighborhood. They're the ones in our homes who are checking in with everybody. Hey, how are you doing? Are things going good? What can I do to lift you up? And what more often than not we're called to do is to be humble in the offering and to be generous with what we have to offer without any regard for return. For God is the one who then brings forth that joy within us and gives that joy to others. And thanks be to God wherever this is taking place, because then we're experiencing the saints in our midst. You'll never find a saint in all of history who wasn't both genuinely humble and also incredibly generous. And their motivation was because the joy they experience in bringing joy to others. You know, my friend Ron has sort of a tagline he likes to sort of tell on himself. It goes like this: you know, Father, we started with nothing, and guess what? We have nearly all of it left. But that simply isn't true. In fact, in discussing with them about their 50th wedding anniversary and the party, they thought that perhaps there might be about 20 people, to which I quickly said, are you out of your mind? You need to start about 200 and start working your way up, because there are so many people who are part of your life because of how much joy you bring them. Indeed, all of us who know them feel privileged in knowing them because of what they brought to us. And the challenge for us then is to bring forth to others what we ourselves have received. And isn't that the very heart and the very message of Christ? To give to others what we ourselves have first received by way of joy from him.